The dying alien girl and the impossible hope. Ethan's ship was falling. The alarm screamed in his ears. Red lights flashed as the control panel flickered, barely holding power. He had lost control. The planet below was getting closer, too fast. He braced himself, gripping the chair as the ship crashed through the thick atmosphere. The last thing he saw was a dark, endless desert stretching far beyond the horizon. Then, everything went black. When Ethan opened his eyes, he felt pain in every part of his body. His ship was broken, scattered across the rocky sand. Smoke curled into the air. His suit was cracked but still held pressure. He was alive. Slowly, he pushed himself up and checked his oxygen levels. Enough for a few days. He had to find shelter, water, and maybe some way to send a distress signal. But as he turned, he saw something that made him freeze. A figure. Lying near a pile of black stones was an alien girl. Her skin was pale blue, almost glowing under the twin suns. Her hair was long, silver like starlight, but dirty and tangled. Her body was thin, weak, dying. Her chest barely moved as she struggled to breathe. Ethan's heart pounded. He had seen alien species before, but this girl, she looked young, fragile. She was wearing strange armor, cracked and burned, as if she had survived a battle, or worse. He took a cautious step forward. The girl's eyelids fluttered open. Her eyes, large and golden, locked onto him. She tried to speak, but her voice was dry, broken. Help. Ethan knelt beside her, his training kicking in. He checked her pulse. Weak. Her body was burning with fever. Her breath was shallow. She was dying. Ethan's mind raced. He had basic medical supplies, but not for an alien body. He didn't even know what species she was. If he gave her human medicine, it could kill her faster. But doing nothing, she would be dead in minutes. He reached into his survival pack, pulling out a water pouch. Carefully, he lifted her head and let a few drops touch her lips. She shuddered but swallowed. "Who did this to you?" he asked. Her fingers weakly curled around his sleeve. Sickness. A sickness. A disease. Ethan's stomach twisted. What if this was contagious? What if he was already infected? But there was no time to think about that. The girl's body jerked as a violent cough shook her frame. A strange, black liquid dripped from the side of her mouth. Ethan's heart pounded harder. This wasn't just any sickness. This was something deadly. Suddenly, a deep growl echoed through the air. Ethan turned sharply. Shadows moved in the distance. They were not alone. A group of tall, armored figures approached, their eyes glowing red beneath their helmets. Aliens. They carried weapons, sharp, spear-like staffs that pulsed with strange energy. Ethan instinctively reached for his sidearm. One of the warriors stepped forward, pointing directly at him. Human. His voice was deep, filled with hatred. Ethan didn't move. He knew that tone. These weren't rescuers. The warrior's gaze flickered down to the dying girl. His expression twisted in disgust. She is infected. Step away from the cursed one. Ethan didn't move. She needs help. She is already dead. The warrior raised his weapon. Ethan moved fast. He placed himself between the girl and the warrior, hand tightening on his gun. "I don't leave people behind." The other warriors shifted, gripping their weapons. The leader narrowed his glowing eyes. "You are a fool, human. That girl carries the plague of our world. If you touch her, you will die next." Ethan felt the weight of those words. But then he looked down at the girl again. At her trembling fingers, at her silent plea for help. A choice. The logical choice was to leave her, to walk away and save himself. But Ethan had never been good at the logical choice. He lifted the girl gently into his arms. The warriors stiffened. Their weapons hummed with deadly energy. "You would risk everything for a dying alien," the leader hissed. Ethan stared him down. "She's not dead yet." The alien leader raised his staff, ready to strike. But then, something impossible happened. The girl gasped in his arms, her golden eyes flashing open. Her skin, once burning with fever, began to cool. The black veins faded. The coughing stopped. Ethan barely had time to react before a terrified whisper swept through the warriors. "The sickness is retreating." Ethan's blood ran cold. The plague that had no cure was disappearing. And the only thing that had changed was his touch. The warriors stumbled back in horror. "Human, what are you?" Ethan looked down at the girl. Her fingers tightened around his shirt. She was still weak, still barely alive. But she wasn't dying anymore. Something in his body had changed her, and now everyone wanted to know why. The human's blood is the cure, but at a terrible cost. The desert air was thick with tension. The alien warriors stood frozen, their glowing red eyes locked onto Ethan. The leader, High Commander Xiron, tightened his grip on his spear-like weapon, but he did not strike. Instead, he whispered in disbelief. The sickness retreated. Ethan looked down at the alien girl in his arms. Just moments ago, she had been dying, her body burning with fever, black veins spreading like poison under her pale blue skin. But now, the darkness was fading. Her breath, once shallow and weak, had steadied. Her golden eyes flickered open, filled with confusion and something else. Fear. She was alive. And somehow, it was because of him. Ethan didn't understand. He was no doctor, no scientist. His only training was in survival, exploration, and defense. But something in his body, his immune system, his genetics, had stopped the disease that had nearly killed her. The warriors backed away, their fear turning to hostility. "This is an abomination," one of them growled. "The human carries a curse." Xiron turned his piercing gaze on Ethan. "You will come with us." Ethan tensed. He didn't trust them. These warriors had been ready to let the girl die, calling her cursed. He wasn't about to hand her over to them. But the girl, Zira, weakly gripped his sleeve. "Go with them," she whispered. "Safer." Ethan hesitated, but he knew he had no choice. He was alone, stranded on a planet he knew nothing about, surrounded by armed warriors who could kill him in seconds. He had to play this smart. Slowly, he nodded. "Fine, but she stays with me." Xiron's eyes narrowed but said nothing. He simply turned and motioned for his soldiers to move. Ethan carried Zira as they marched across the endless desert toward an alien city in the distance, the Forbidden City. The city was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. Tall, curved buildings shimmered under the twin suns, their surfaces shifting like liquid metal. Strange, floating platforms moved above the streets, and blue-skinned aliens in flowing robes walked in silence, their glowing eyes darting toward Ethan with a mix of curiosity and fear. Guards escorted them into a towering fortress at the heart of the city. The air inside was cold, unnaturally so. At the center of the chamber stood a massive, circular structure filled with a dark, bubbling liquid. Ethan shivered as a strange humming sound vibrated through his bones. "Place her in the purification pool," Xiron ordered. Ethan didn't move. "You're not hurting her." "Human." Xiron's voice was sharp. "You have already changed her. If she is to live, we must understand what you have done." Zira coughed, her body still trembling. Ethan hated this. He didn't trust them, but he couldn't risk losing her now. Carefully, he lowered her into the pool. The black liquid wrapped around her body, shimmering with energy. Zira gasped, her golden eyes glowing brighter. Then, the room fell silent. A scientist, a tall alien with deep blue skin and a mechanical eye, stepped forward. He touched the surface of the pool, watching as strange symbols formed in the liquid. His eye flickered. "Impossible," he whispered. "Her blood is changing." Ethan stiffened. "What do you mean?" The scientist looked at him, studying him like he was a puzzle. "Your body fought the disease, but instead of rejecting it, your cells, Adapted. Your immune system isn't just resisting the sickness, it's rewriting it. Ethan's stomach twisted. Rewriting it? What the hell does that mean? The scientist hesitated. It means your blood is the cure. But it also means... He glanced at Zira. She was breathing steadily now, the dark veins completely gone. Her body looked stronger, more alive than before. It means she is no longer what she was. The cost of survival. Zira opened her eyes, and for the first time, she truly looked at Ethan. "I feel different," she whispered. Ethan felt a chill. Different how? She slowly lifted her arm, staring at her own hand as if it didn't belong to her. Stronger, clearer, like I was sleeping all my life. And now I am awake. Ethan didn't know what to say. The scientist turned to Exiron. "Commander, this is a dangerous path. If the human's blood has truly altered her, we cannot know what she will become." Xiron's expression was unreadable. "We will watch her closely." Ethan clenched his fists. "She's not an experiment." Xiron stepped closer, towering over him. "She is not yours to protect, human. And if your blood can do this, then perhaps it can do more." Ethan realized the truth too late. They weren't afraid of him. They were afraid of what his blood could do. The power to heal, the power to change, it was something they could not control. And that made him a threat. The transformation and the chase begins. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He sat in the cold stone chamber, his back against the wall, his thoughts spinning in a storm of questions. Across from him, Zira lay on a thin metallic bed, her breath steady, her body still. But she was changing. Even in sleep, her skin seemed to shimmer under the dim blue light of the alien fortress. Her once weak body now looked stronger, her muscles more defined, her golden eyes sharper when they opened. The disease that had once nearly killed her was gone. Not just gone, but erased, rewritten into something unknown. Ethan clenched his fists. His blood had done this. His human immune system had somehow merged with hers, creating something new, something the aliens feared. And they weren't going to let him walk away. A metallic hiss echoed through the chamber as the doors slid open. High Commander Xiron entered, his red eyes glowing under his helmet. Behind him, 2 guards carried long, spear-like weapons that pulsed with energy. Ethan stood immediately. "If you're here to take her away, you'll have to go through me." Xiron ignored him, stepping toward Zira, studying her with an expression that was impossible to read. "She is awake." Ethan turned, and his breath caught. Zira was sitting up, her golden eyes locked onto Xiron with a sharpness that hadn't been there before. She looked stronger, her body no longer fragile. The exhaustion, the sickness, it was all gone. "I feel alive." Her voice was steady, more powerful than before. Xiron's jaw tightened. "You should not be. No one has ever survived the plague." Ethan stepped between them. "She's not a science project. She's not a test subject. She's coming with me." The guards immediately raised their weapons. Xiron didn't even flinch. "You do not understand, human. What has happened here is a violation of nature. Your blood did not just cure her, it changed her." Ethan's stomach twisted. "Changed her how?" Zira answered before Xiron could. "I can hear something." Ethan frowned. "Hear what?" Zira placed a hand over her chest, closing her eyes. "The stars, the ground, the air. It's like they are speaking to me, calling me." Xiron's expression darkened. "This is exactly what I feared." Ethan turned sharply. "What the hell are you talking about?" The High Commander didn't hesitate this time. Her ancestors were not always weak. Long ago, her people ruled over countless worlds. They were powerful, too powerful. The old rulers feared them, so they cursed their bloodline, making them sick, making them dependent. Your blood has broken that curse." Ethan stared at him. "You mean, she was never supposed to be weak? She was never supposed to survive?" Xiron corrected. And now she is becoming something unknown. Silence hung between them. Then, a sharp alarm suddenly blared through the halls. Xiron stiffened. The High Council knows. They are coming for you both. Ethan's heart pounded. Coming for us? Why? Xiron turned to him, his gaze unreadable. Because they fear what you have created. A metallic boom shook the fortress. The sound of marching soldiers filled the halls. Zira gripped Ethan's arm. We have to run. Xiron exhaled sharply, his expression torn between duty and something else, something almost like regret. Then he did something Ethan never expected. He stepped aside. Go. Now. Ethan hesitated. You're letting us escape. Xiron's red eyes locked onto him. If the council gets their hands on her, they will tear her apart to study her. And you. They will drain every last drop of your blood to understand your immunity. Run, human. Run before I change my mind. That was all Ethan needed to hear. He grabbed Zira's hand, and together they ran. The chase begins. The halls of the fortress were alive with flashing red lights and echoing sirens. Zira was fast, faster than she should have been. Ethan had to struggle to keep up as they sprinted through the winding corridors. How do we get out of here? Ethan asked. Zira didn't even hesitate. Follow me. Ethan didn't have time to question how she knew the way. They turned down a long hallway, only to come face to face with a wall of armed soldiers. Their glowing weapons hummed with energy. Surrender, one of them shouted. Ethan lifted his gun, but before he could fire, Zira moved. She blurred. 1 second she was beside him. The next, she was in front of the soldiers. They barely had time to react. Zira grabbed the first soldier and threw him across the room with one hand. Ethan's eyes widened. The other soldiers lunged, but she was already moving. Faster than a human. Stronger than a human. She dodged a spear strike, ripping the weapon out of the soldier's hands and snapping it in half like a twig. The guards hesitated. For the first time, they looked afraid. Ethan didn't waste the opportunity. He grabbed one of the fallen weapons and aimed it at the remaining soldiers. Move, or we move you. The guards, already shaken, took a step back. That was all they needed. Ethan and Zira bolted. Into the Westlands. They didn't stop running until they reached the outer walls of the city. Beyond them, an endless stretch of jagged dark wastelands stretched to the horizon. The land looked lifeless, cracked, like something had burned it long ago. Zira hesitated. We go out there, we may never come back. Ethan looked over his shoulder. The alarms were still blaring. The city would be hunting them soon. He looked back at her. Then we better make sure it's worth it. Zira nodded. She reached forward, pressing her hand against the outer wall. The stone shook. Before Ethan could ask how she was doing that, a section of the wall shifted, creating a narrow opening. Zira's glowing eyes met his. Run. And together, they disappeared into the wastelands. The dark secret of Zira's species. The wastelands stretched for miles in every direction. A barren, broken land of sharp black rocks and swirling dust storms. The twin suns hung low in the sky, casting eerie shadows across the landscape. Ethan and Zira ran until their legs burned, until their breath came in ragged gasps. Only then did they stop, crouching behind a jagged rock formation. The city was far behind them now, but Ethan knew it wouldn't be long before they were hunted. Zira pressed a hand to her forehead, her golden eyes flickering. She looked different, stronger, more alive than she had been before. But there was something else too, something in her expression. Fear. Ethan wiped sweat from his brow. All right, I think we lost them. But now we need a plan. We can't just keep running forever. Zira didn't respond. She was staring at her hands. Her fingers trembled slightly, as if she could feel something Ethan couldn't. Ethan's stomach tightened. Zira. She finally looked at him, her expression unreadable. I remember something. Something I shouldn't remember. Ethan frowned. What do you mean? She exhaled slowly, gripping her arms as if she was cold, even in the heat of the wasteland. I was never supposed to survive that disease. None of my people were. A cold feeling crawled up Ethan's spine. Siron said your people were once powerful. He said they were made weak on purpose. Zira nodded. I think I know why now. She took a deep breath, her voice barely above a whisper. We were gods once. Ethan blinked. What? Zira's gaze drifted toward the horizon, as if looking back through time. Long ago, my ancestors weren't sick. We were something else, something more than we are now. She turned back to him, her golden eyes glowing brighter. And we were feared. Ethan didn't like where this was going. Feared by who? Zira hesitated, as if the answer frightened her. By the ones who rule the stars. A forgotten history. They sat under a large rock overhang as Zira tried to put the pieces together. She spoke slowly, as if the memories were unraveling inside her mind, returning after being buried for centuries. My people, the Chiron. We were different once. We were connected to the universe in a way no other species was. We could feel the energy of the stars, the pulse of planets, the life within all things. Ethan furrowed his brows. Like telepathy. Zira shook her head. More than that. We were creators. We could shape the very fabric of matter. Heal with a touch. Change the course of life itself. Ethan's chest tightened. That sounded eerily similar to what had happened to her. His blood hadn't just healed her. It had reawakened something ancient. Zira's expression darkened. And that was the problem. Ethan swallowed. Let me guess. The rulers of the galaxy didn't like the idea of your people being that powerful. Zira nodded. We were too strong, too advanced. They saw us as a threat to their rule. So they did the only thing they could. Ethan exhaled. They took away your power. Zira's voice was quiet, filled with the weight of history. They poisoned our bloodlines. Not with war, not with destruction, but with weakness. They made us dependent on their medicine, their aid. They turned us into something fragile, something easy to control. Ethan clenched his fists. They turned your people into slaves. Zira flinched at the word but didn't deny it. We forgot what we were. Generations passed. We became weak, sickly. We believed we were just, broken. Asterisk, asterisk, but it was all a lie. Asterisk, asterisk. Ethan let the words sink in. This wasn't just about some long-lost history. This was about what was happening right now. Because if her ancestors had once been powerful, and his blood had somehow reactivated whatever they had lost, then Zira wasn't just healed. She was becoming something her people hadn't been for centuries. And that meant they were in even more danger than before. A dangerous awakening. Zira ran a hand through her silver hair, clearly disturbed by the memories resurfacing inside her. I don't know how much of it is true, she admitted. But I feel it, Ethan. I feel something waking up inside me. And it scares me. Ethan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. We need to figure out exactly what's happening to you. If your body is changing, we need answers before it's too late. Zira nodded slowly. There's one place we might find them. Ethan sat up. Where? She hesitated. The Forgotten Ruins. Ethan frowned. Sounds friendly. They're ancient, Zira explained. A place where my ancestors left behind the knowledge of what we used to be. If there are any answers left, they will be there. Ethan nodded. Then that's where we're going. But before they could move, a distant rumble shook the air. Ethan froze. Did you hear that? Zira stood quickly, scanning the horizon. Her golden eyes flashed. Then she whispered two words that sent chills through Ethan's body. They're coming. The hunt begins. In the distance, the sky darkened. A fleet of black ships was approaching fast, cutting through the air like silent predators. The High Council had sent their hunters. Ethan grabbed his weapon. We need to move. Now. Zira didn't argue. She took off at a sprint, Ethan right behind her. But even as they ran, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling gnawing at his mind. This wasn't just about escaping anymore. This was about what Zira was becoming. Because if she truly held the power her ancestors once had, if his blood had awakened something ancient inside her, then she wasn't just being hunted. She was becoming the most dangerous being in the galaxy. And no one would stop until she was either controlled or destroyed. The betrayal and the ultimate test. The wasteland air burned hot as Ethan and Zira sprinted over jagged rocks, their breath ragged, their bodies running on pure adrenaline. Behind them, the sky darkened as black warships sliced through the clouds, their engines humming like the whisper of death. The High Council's forces had found them. Ethan stole a glance at Zira as they ran. Something about her had changed. She wasn't just faster, she was anticipating every move. Her body adjusted to the terrain before her foot even landed, like she knew the landscape, like she was connected to it. It was unnatural. And yet it was the only reason they were still alive. They reached a canyon, steep and narrow, with winding paths leading into the shadows below. Zira skidded to a stop, golden eyes flickering as she scanned the rock formations. Ethan caught up, panting. "What are you doing? We have to keep moving." Zira ignored him, pressing a hand against the stone wall. The rock trembled slightly beneath her touch. Then it shifted. Ethan's heart nearly stopped. What the hell was that? Zira didn't answer. Instead, she pulled him forward as the canyon walls moved, creating a hidden path into the darkness. Ethan hesitated. "Did you just?" "I don't know how, but I did," Zira interrupted. "And if I can do that, then maybe." She turned, staring at her own hands. For a moment, she almost looked afraid. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll figure it out later. Right now, we move." They vanished into the canyon as the warships descended behind them. The hidden sanctuary. They ran until their legs could carry them no farther. The canyon walls stretched into an underground cavern, a vast hollow space carved by time itself. In the center stood something impossible. A ruined temple, covered in ancient symbols that glowed faintly in the dark. Ethan's breath caught. "What is this place?" Zira stepped forward slowly, her fingers grazing the walls. "I don't know, but I feel like I've been here before." Ethan shivered. "That's not comforting." Before she could answer, a voice echoed from the shadows. "You shouldn't have come here." Ethan and Zira spun around. From the darkness, a figure emerged. A tall, robed alien with mechanical implants fused to his arms and a single glowing eye. Zira took a sharp breath. "Dr. Yulan." Ethan tensed. "You know him." The alien stepped forward, studying Zira with a mixture of fascination and fear. "I was once the lead scientist of the High Council. I studied the ancient bloodlines of your people, trying to understand what had been lost." Ethan's grip tightened on his weapon. "And let me guess, you want to put her under a microscope, too." Yulan sighed. "You don't understand. What has happened to her is not just rare, it is impossible." Zira's golden eyes burned. "You knew, didn't you? You knew we were never supposed to be sick." Yulan hesitated. "I suspected, but the truth was buried long before my time. I was never permitted to investigate further." Ethan's patience snapped. "Why are you here?" The scientist's mechanical eye flickered. "To warn you. The High Council will not stop hunting you. They see your blood as a threat, human." He turned to Zira. "And you. They see you as a weapon they must control or destroy." Ethan's heart pounded. "So what? You came here to help us." Yulan hesitated again. And that was when Ethan knew. He felt Zira tense beside him. Something was wrong. The betrayal. Before Ethan could react, a high-pitched whine filled the air. A signal. Yulan had activated a beacon. Zira's eyes widened in horror. "You didn't." Ethan grabbed his weapon. You led them here. Yulan didn't move. I had no choice. A deep rumble shook the cavern. Above them, warships were descending. Zira took a sharp step forward, her hands clenched into fists. You sold us out. The scientist's face was unreadable. I had to. If they find you, they might let you live. If you keep running, they will wipe out anyone who helps you. Ethan's pulse pounded. He lifted his gun. That's not your choice to make. No, Yulan said softly. It isn't. The cavern erupted in chaos. Warriors in black armor poured into the ruins, their weapons raised. Ethan fired first, taking out the nearest soldier before ducking behind a fallen stone pillar. Zira didn't move. She stood in the center of the chaos, her golden eyes burning as her rage built. Something inside her broke. The air shifted. The ground shook. And then, the cavern exploded with energy. The soldiers were thrown back, weapons ripped from their hands as a wave of power rushed outward from Zira. The symbols on the temple walls glowed brighter, as if they recognized her. Yulan stumbled backward, fear in his single eye. This isn't possible. Zira's voice echoed like thunder. You wanted to see what I am. Fine. Let me show you. She raised her hand. A soldier lunged, only to be lifted off the ground by an invisible force. He choked, gasping for air, before Zira flicked her fingers. The soldier was hurled across the cavern like a ragdoll. Ethan's breath caught. Zira. But she wasn't listening. Her gaze turned to Yulan, the betrayer, the one who had handed them over. She lifted her hand again. Yulan's body froze. He gasped, struggling to breathe, his mechanical eye flickering wildly. Ethan rushed forward. Zira, stop. She didn't move. For the first time, her expression was unreadable. For the first time, she looked dangerous. Ethan grabbed her shoulder. If you kill him, you're proving them right. Zira's hand trembled. The ground cracked beneath her feet. For a moment, she looked like she might let go. Then, she dropped Yulan. The scientist crumpled to the ground, coughing. Ethan exhaled. We need to go. Now. Zira's golden eyes flickered. Then she nodded. They ran. And behind them, the ruins of an ancient power stirred once more. The final battle and the truth revealed. The sky above the wastelands burned with fire. Ethan and Zira ran, their boots kicking up dust as the warships hovered overhead, searchlights sweeping the ground. Behind them, the ruins trembled with the aftershocks of Zira's unleashed power. They weren't just being hunted anymore. They were being eliminated. A deep mechanical voice echoed from the sky. Surrender now. There is no escape. Ethan glanced at Zira. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was angry. They're never going to stop, Ethan said, breathing hard. No matter where we run, they'll keep coming. Zira slowed to a stop, turning her golden gaze toward the approaching ships. Then we don't run anymore. Ethan's chest tightened. Zira. But she wasn't listening. Her hands clenched at her sides. The air crackled around her, energy pulsing like a living storm. Ethan had seen her strength before, but this was something else entirely. The ground shook beneath them, deep cracks splitting the earth. Above, the warships hesitated. The pilots could sense it too. Something was wrong. Then, Zira lifted her hands. A shockwave blasted outward, sending a pulse of golden light surging toward the sky. The first warship exploded instantly. The second one spiraled out of control, crashing into the rocky terrain with a deafening boom. Ethan staggered back, shielding his face from the blast. Zira, stop. But she wasn't stopping. The last warship hovered, its massive cannons locking onto her. Zira's eyes burned like molten gold. She raised her hand, and the warship froze in place. The engines roared, struggling against an unseen force. The ship's metallic frame groaned as if being crushed by an invisible hand. Inside, the pilots screamed. Ethan grabbed Zira's wrist. That's enough. For a moment, he thought she wouldn't listen. For a moment, he thought she was about to tear the warship apart with her mind. Then her breath hitched. Her fingers trembled. She let go. The warship's engines roared back to life, and it fled. Zira's body swayed, her energy flickering like a dying star. Ethan caught her before she could collapse. "You okay?" She looked up at him, something raw in her expression. "I don't know what I am anymore." The truth hidden in blood. They found shelter in a nearby cavern, the walls lined with strange, glowing crystals that pulsed with faint blue light. Zira sat on the cold ground, staring at her hands. Ethan knelt beside her. "Talk to me." She exhaled slowly. "I wasn't supposed to have this power, Ethan. My people weren't meant to survive without the High Council's control. But your blood, it changed me. It awakened something inside me that was never meant to return." Ethan frowned. "You think I did this to you?" Zira met his gaze. "I don't think you just healed me, Ethan. I think you unlocked me." Ethan's chest tightened. "Unlocked what?" She hesitated. Then her voice dropped to a whisper. "Something the High Council tried to erase from history." Ethan swallowed. "You mean your ancestors?" Zira nodded. "They weren't just powerful, Ethan. They weren't just rulers. They were creators." Ethan's skin crawled. Creators. Zira turned her hands over, staring at them like they belonged to someone else. "The High Council didn't just weaken my people," she murmured. "They stole something from us. They made us forget. They made us less." Ethan exhaled, trying to process what she was saying. "And now you're remembering." She nodded. "But it's more than that. My body is adapting, changing, and I don't know if I can stop it." A heavy silence hung between them. Then Ethan made a decision. "We need to find answers. We need to stop running." Asterisk, asterisk. Zira frowned. "And go where?" Ethan set his jaw. "To the High Council, right to the heart of their empire." Zira's eyes widened. "That's suicide." Ethan shook his head. "No, that's how we end this." Because if the High Council had spent centuries hiding the truth about her people, then maybe, just maybe, it was time to bring that truth back. No matter the cost. The unthinkable choice and a new future. The journey to the High Council's stronghold was nothing short of suicidal. Ethan and Zira knew they were walking into the heart of an empire that had ruled for thousands of years, an empire built on lies, power, and control. But for the first time, Zira wasn't afraid. For the first time, she felt whole. As their stolen ship soared through the black void of space, the towering planet of Solmera Prime came into view. It was not just a planet, it was a fortress. Massive orbital stations circled it, their cannons glowing like distant stars, ready to strike anything that wasn't authorized. The capital city itself was carved into the planet's surface, a place of golden towers and cold steel, where only the most powerful members of the council lived. They had hidden the truth of her people here. And now she was coming to take it back. Ethan adjusted the ship's controls, his jaw set in determination. "We won't get another chance at this. The moment we land, the entire council will know we're here." Zira nodded. "Then we do this fast." Ethan turned to her, hesitation in his eyes. "Are you sure about this? If they find out what you are?" She met his gaze. "Then let them fear me." Into the heart of the empire. They landed in the outer sector of the city, blending into the traffic of diplomats and traders. Disguises wouldn't work forever, but they didn't need forever. They just needed to reach the Hall of Records. Zira led the way, her golden eyes scanning the towering structures as they moved through the maze of bridges and glowing pathways. Ethan whispered, "You really know where we're going?" Zira hesitated. "No, but something inside me does." Ethan sighed. "Great." Guards patrolled every sector, but the closer they got to the heart of the city, the fewer common civilians they saw. Finally, they reached an enormous obsidian tower, its walls engraved with glowing alien script. Zira's breath caught. She recognized the writing. It was her people's language. Ethan touched the surface of the wall. It was cold, too cold. "This isn't just a records hall," he muttered. "It's a tomb." Zira's pulse quickened. They buried the truth. She pressed her hand to the wall, and it responded. A low hum vibrated through the stone as the door unlocked. Ethan stepped back. "That's probably not good." Zira ignored him. She walked inside. The forbidden truth. The chamber was vast, stretching far beneath the surface of the city. Massive archives of ancient records lined the walls, each glowing with encrypted data. At the center of the room stood a monument, a statue of a Chiron, Zira's species, standing tall, arms raised toward the stars. The inscription below it sent a chill down Ethan's spine. "To the gods who fell." Zira's voice was barely a whisper. "This is it, the truth they try to erase." Ethan scanned the room. "We don't have much time. What are we looking for?" Zira didn't answer. She was already moving. She reached out, touching the console beside the statue. Light flared around her. A holographic recording flickered to life. A voice, deep, commanding, ancient, spoke from the darkness. "If you are hearing this, then our time is truly over." Zira froze. Ethan's eyes widened. "Who the hell is that?" The voice continued. "We, the Chiron, were never meant to be conquered. We were not warriors. We were the architects of creation, the shapers of life. But the rulers of the stars feared us. They called us unnatural, dangerous. And so, they turned our own gifts against us." Zira's breathing became shallow. "They did not kill us. They unmade us, stripped us of our power, poisoned our bloodlines, erased our history. And now, they rule in our place." The hologram flickered. "But one day, the bloodline will awaken again. And when it does..." The recording cut out. Silence filled the chamber. Ethan turned to Zira. "They weren't just rulers, were they? They were something more." Zira swallowed hard. "We weren't just people." She looked at him, something burning in her golden gaze. "We were gods." The High Council arrives. A loud boom shook the chamber. Ethan spun around. "We've got company." From the entrance, dozens of soldiers stormed inside, weapons raised. And behind them, a tall figure in ornate black and silver robes stepped forward. The Supreme Chancellor of the High Council. He studied Zira with cold, calculating eyes. "You should not exist." Zira clenched her fists. "And yet, here I am." The Chancellor's lips curled. "You do not understand, child. Your people were never meant to return. The universe is better without your kind." Ethan stepped forward. "You spent centuries covering this up, poisoning an entire species. Why?" The Chancellor exhaled. "Because the Chiron were never meant to rule." Zira's voice was ice. "Because we threatened your power." The Chancellor's eyes flashed. "Because you threatened the balance of everything your kind created, but you could also destroy. You held the power of gods, and gods are dangerous." Ethan raised his gun. "Then it's time for a new order." But before he could fire, the entire room trembled. Zira closed her eyes. She wasn't fighting anymore. She was becoming. Her body glowed, golden veins pulsing beneath her skin. The power that had been buried for centuries was no longer sleeping. It had awakened. The guards backed away in fear. Even the Chancellor took a step back. Zira opened her eyes. "The time of your rule is over." She raised her hand. The walls shattered. The soldiers were thrown back like weightless dolls. The entire council chamber trembled. Ethan shouted, "Zira, you don't have to do this." For a moment, she hesitated. For a moment, she had the power to erase everything. Then, she let go. The energy faded. The Chancellor collapsed to his knees, gasping. Zira stepped forward. You feared my people would be gods. But gods do not rule. Gods create. She turned away. And together, she and Ethan walked out of the chamber, leaving the High Council's empire crumbling behind them. A new future. The galaxy would never be the same. The High Council's rule was broken. The truth had been revealed. And as Zira stood at the edge of a new world, she whispered, "This is just the beginning."